work, did it? Okay. I don't want to start too late this morning. Okay. I think we should get going, and we should have folks join us as they get properly caffeinated and fed. Good morning, everyone. I hope that you got some sleep. I understand there was a great deal of drinking that went on in the hotel, which is a fine thing. I hope that was fun. This morning's plenary is different from the others that we have run thus far and that you'll see this afternoon. We call it the lightning round, and we call it that because I'm going to force the presenters to come up on the stage, deliver their presentations rapidly with 3 slides each and under 5 minutes. And what they are going to do is show you some of the latest research that's been done in this field and some of the really cool tools that are being developed in order to help activists and bloggers and others. Some of this research I hope you find really interesting. Some of it I think is really thought-provoking. You will not get the full story this morning, but you will get a taste, and you will get a URL or a hint of how to find out more information. And so if you feel not sated about the topic, please feel free to corner the person who has delivered the presentation afterwards and give them a hard time or ask them nice questions even. We will have another presentation on the current state of the Internet and its interaction with political change after that, and then we will take a break. I will ask each of these presenters to come up, be brief. We will take a question or two from the audience, depending upon whether or not they stick to time. And each of the presenters will also introduce themselves and who they're with, because that will cut down on the amount of time of me coming up and down from this podium. Guy, you're up.
Morning, everybody. Bonjour. I'm Guy Berger, but now I live in Paris, so I'm Guy Berger. I've been reinvented. I work for UNESCO. I joined them in November last year, but I'm not speaking about UNESCO. But I did join them because UNESCO supports free flow of ideas through words and images, and irrespective of platform. And that resonated with me because I'm a South African. I was a political prisoner for 2.5 years because of exercising free speech under the apartheid regime. So I like what UNESCO stands for. And before I joined UNESCO, I liked the fact that I was approached by the Open Society Foundations to look at what was happening in digitalization and free speech in South Africa. So that's really what I'm going to speak about, which is what's happening in digital in South Africa. This was part of a study, one of 60 countries that the Open Society Foundations are looking at, which is quite a mega global study. They've done 21 so far, and my one came out in April. The study looks at quite a lot of things. It covers law, it covers digital activism, it covers self-regulation, it covers spectrum allocation, it covers journalism, it covers the economics of digital communication. And it's very nice because each study takes a 5-year look, so you can see how things are changing and what the trends are. And the result is a 100-page book, this is the South African one, and there's a few others out there if you want to have a look. So let me start telling you what I found out in terms of South Africa. 21 countries, as I said, have been done so far. The South African report was really to examine this question, what can digital change deliver? And I was hoping I would find, because I was also known in South Africa as Mr. Digital, I was hoping I'd find that digital was actually producing more mass media, so that people had a lot more choice to consume media and to produce media. And of course, South Africa, coming from its history, very divided country, very unequal society, and a very big digital divide. And critical for those of us who are coming from an experience of democracy is, what is journalism's role? How good is it? How much public service is it doing, and how widely does it reach? So that was a challenge. Now, when one's looking at digital change, you have to figure out what you're going to be researching. And I'd like to share with you an anecdote I heard about Tim Berners-Lee, who was the inventor of the web. As you may know, a lot of people confuse the web and the internet. And somebody said to Tim Berners-Lee, aren't you distressed nowadays that people think the internet is the web and the web is the internet? He said no. He's distressed because people nowadays think Facebook is the internet. So for a lot of people in South Africa and developing countries, for them the internet is Facebook, but Facebook on a phone. So this is a very interesting thing, and it's a mistake we don't want to get into, I think, in mapping digital change, because Facebook on a phone is not the be-all and end-all of the internet. Phones, as we know, particularly in developing countries, suffer from congestion on the airwaves, and you suffer from congestion on the screen. So much as one's looking at that kind of connectivity as an advance in the past, it's not the greatest thing. The second thing is that when one's looking at digital, we mustn't think that digital is the internet, because digital is much wider than the internet. And digital includes most cellular telephony, and digital includes digital broadcasting. So if you're looking at digital and how digital changes society, you have to go wider than the internet. But here's the nub of the thing. How does digital communications at large network together into a patchwork? So how does digital broadcasting relate to the internet, and how do cell phones relate to the internet? That's one of the key things, I think. So this is what we found. Ta-da! Analog radio is still king. And we found old-fashioned newspapers are still setting the agenda. And then we found digital television. Actually, it's hell of expensive to roll this out in a developing country. And at the same time, it's very politically contested and very subject to a lot of geopolitics about what standards you're going to use, and very subject also to the kind of political shenanigans in a government which it keeps on changing its Minister of Communications. So you had some big problems with DTT. It's still not there. It still hasn't really commenced, let alone ended. One of the things also about the politics of South Africa is that there's no synergies between the broadcasting policy and practice and the broadband policy and practice. So you have these two initiatives rolling out in different universes. And the result of that is that you only have about a third of people accessing the net, and that's on phones. And only about 14% have broadband connections. And that includes some of them using their phones for broadband. And then you also find, I think, that because of the state of affairs, that the Internet's not really being used very much for journalism and public communication. It's serving personal purposes. Facebook for personal purposes and so on. So the findings are quite disappointing in terms of what one was hoping would happen. So what is the prognosis for the future? Well, when eventually digital broadcasting in TV happens, it's unlikely there will be more TV channels. This is not because of the technological limits. Of course, digital opens up a lot of spectrum, but because there's not a business case to run more TV channels. And also, it's a concept that broadcasters still seem to think of broadcasting as a top-down, one-way distribution of content. The result being that they don't see the possibility of user-generated channels to fill the new space. Let me also, sorry, there we go. Won't see many new channels. The other thing, actually, let me just stick on that for 1 second more. In digital television in developing countries, you don't buy a new TV set, you buy a set-top box, which then enables you to use your old TV set. So you receive a digital signal and you display it on an analog box. Now, the potential exists for those analog boxes to actually be computers. And the potential exists to link those boxes, those set-top boxes, to link them to the Internet and use the Internet for upload, probably through 3G, and to use the broadcast digital stream for the download. And so you could actually say, I would like to get Wikipedia downloaded, stored on my set-top box, and my kids could use it for homework. So it's a fantastic opportunity to begin to converge digital broadcasting and internet access, but it doesn't happen, okay, partially because of the policy thing. So you're going to have digital television, but not really making a huge difference. The other thing is that because it's taking so long to get to digital television, it means that spectrum is not being released, and therefore the possibility of rolling out WiMAX, lots of Wi-Fi spots and so on, it's not really there. So the cell phone companies have to refarm their frequencies, which is not the end of the world, but it's not ideal. The result is that you're going to get more mobile growth in South Africa, but the screen size is going to be a factor. I think the new digital divide will be a divide between those who have access to big screens and those who have access to small screens. There'll be more people contributing to journalism, that's great, but the more there is, the more the government is getting uppity and jittery about it. So there's a lot of pressure on journalists, self-regulation, and the ISPs. The last point I'd say is that the good thing is that finally in 2012 the government has begun to realize it needs to actually develop an integrated policy that would bring together the broadband world and the broadcast world. So that's the state of digital. I think integrated digital comms is yet to come in South Africa, but there are some good trends. It's certainly better than it was, but we still have a long way to go. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jeffrey Ganem, and I'm an attorney in Washington, D.C., specialized in media development, and I'm also a researcher. It's my pleasure to be here. My challenge was, before the uprisings, to research how social media is changing the way Arabs across the Middle East and North Africa region were communicating and engaging online. 1 year after the Arab Spring, I set out to identify major trends and developments in the sharing of news and online engagements by citizens, media, governments, activists, and many others. Here's what I found. Before the uprisings, Arabs were engaging in freedom unprecedented up to that time, despite the development of activist communities, of bloggers, tens of thousands of bloggers, various media initiatives, citizen journalism, a real vibrant environment for the media community online. It contributed to a virtual civil society that was far more vibrant than the actual civil society that existed in the physical world on the streets of most Arab capitals. Media helped ultimately to mobilize protests. It didn't inspire the protests. The inspiration came from decades-long grievances, but the media nonetheless helped document those grievances, give voice to those who were in far-flung areas, as well as helped amplify the demands being heard globally. This environment coexisted in a very strict, rigid legal regime where analog-era laws and regulations were used against the activist community. Laws that were used to surveil, to intimidate, to harass, ultimately to arrest, incarcerate, torture, and even lead to the deaths of activists, Khaled Said being among the most noteworthy, among many others. So while you had this tremendous freedom, unbeknownst to the world by and large, and it came as a surprise to most of the world, maybe not to those of us in this room, but many were rather surprised at the extent to which social and digital media had been building up and bubbling up, and the networks that were created, which were very instrumental in the development of the messages that, through the help of the Arab transnational satellite network, Al Jazeera, were then beamed back into the region for the vast majority of Arabs, 358 million people, who are not online. In fact, according to the International Telecommunications Union, only about 105 million Arabs are, in fact, online. 1 year after the Arab Spring, I found a profound media shift ongoing in the region. It is a shift that is characterized by communities of tens of millions of online contributors who are creating content, sharing that content, and influencing the news and information channels across the region, again, with the help of the Arab satellite networks, which are also looking to the online space for inspiration, for news and information, much the same way that the staid Arab state-owned government media are also being reinvigorated through the online space, through contributions of citizen journalists, citizen witnesses, media activists, lay citizens, and so many others. What we find is the development of an Arab digital media vortex, a whirling, churning tornado of contributions. Within that vortex is the recognition of governments across the Arab world, particularly in Egypt and Bahrain and Syria and others to come, I'm certain, that there is a cyber battle, what I've identified as a cyber battle for the predominant narrative in the region. Governments have recognized that it's not enough simply to filter, to control, to block the internet online space, and that's not going to completely disappear. It will be used opportunistically. But increasingly, the efforts are to go after the message and the messenger, be it an editor of a paper in Tunisia, be it a Facebook page user in the Palestinian territories, or any number of other individuals who are conveying their criticism of what's happening. Bahrain, we've seen the use of Twitter trolls to go after online critics. We've seen in Egypt, the Supreme Council of Armed Forces, probably one of the best examples of regional use of social and digital media. The SCAF has got 1.8 million followers on its Facebook page, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens after the presidential elections this week, to see what happens to the Facebook and Twitter feeds that the SCAF has been putting out. But what's significant about those feeds is that you also see criticism to the tune of perhaps tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of critical remarks, and that is significant. What's interesting is that we're going to continue to see the refinement of the online space. The battle for the predominant narrative will continue to evolve and be defined. The Arab digital media vortex will continue to expand. We see increasing numbers of readers who are following mainstream news and information. And so it's going to be, there's so much more to talk about, and I really encourage you to take a look at the reports. I want to send a special thanks to Google for this invitation and to the National Endowment for Democracy Center for International Media Assistance for its support. Thank you very much. Look up the reports under my name and or the titles. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Kenzier, and I'm here to present a research study on authoritarianism in social media in Azerbaijan, co-authored with Dr. Katie Pierce of the University of Washington. Most scholars assume that greater access to the internet encourages support for dissent. We found that in authoritarian states, the opposite can be true. Azerbaijan is a small petrostate that was once part of the Soviet Union. Since 1993, it has been ruled by a father and son dictatorship. Media has long been censored in Azerbaijan, but the internet has posed a new challenge to the stability of the regime. The internet is both unpredictable and a prime venue of unsanctioned content. It threatens what post-Soviet authoritarian states value most: power through consistency and consistency through power. While most post-Soviet authoritarian states have responded to the internet by censoring it, Azerbaijan has gone in a different direction. They seek to control the internet not through censorship, but through openness, what Rebecca McKinnon calls networked authoritarianism. States that practice networked authoritarianism do not block online dissent outright. They compete with it, in this case, making an example out of online dissenters in order to affirm the futility of activism to a disillusioned public. In 2009, activists Emin Milli and Adnan Hajizadeh were arrested after posting a satirical video of government corruption and wastefulness on YouTube. The case attracted international attention, as well as outrage among the frequent social media users with whom the bloggers interacted online. From the arrest of the bloggers in 2009 to their release in 2010, the case proved a popular cause among Azerbaijani activists. In other contexts, such cases have managed to galvanize the opposition, but in this case, the opposite happened. In the aftermath of the case, support for political protests decreased significantly among frequent Azerbaijani internet users, the very people who were most supportive of the bloggers and outraged by their arrest. Frequent internet users were the only group to experience this drop in support during this time, and no other demographic variable accounts for the shift. So why did this happen? It happened because leaving the internet open made it easy for the government to publicize the horrifying repercussions of even mild, humorous forms of dissent. Had the state censored the bloggers, they would not have been able to instill this fear. Only by making the internet open could they reach the frequent internet users who they had come to see as a threat. As Milley remarked, this is the way they function. They punish some people and let everyone else watch, to say, this is what can happen to you. The case of the Azerbaijani bloggers challenges assumptions that an open internet and transparency automatically increase support for activism. Before the arrests of the bloggers, one prominent Azerbaijani activist compared going on Facebook to being in the movie The Matrix, where the fog of apolitical real life was lifted and political problems were confronted. Azerbaijan's online campaign against social media activists and the use of violence against them reminded Azerbaijani internet users that there is no barrier between the virtual world and real life. Both are dominated by the regime. Networked authoritarianism is particularly effective on a population that views the internet as a refuge from their political reality, instead of as a means to transform it. In authoritarian states, the online circulation of government atrocities often serves to confirm people's worst suspicions. Fear and cynicism are as common reactions to these quasi-revelations as are outrage and a desire to fight for change. Our research argues that we need to consider the political cultures of authoritarian states before assuming that the internet will automatically inspire people to contest them. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nadim Kabesi, and for a year and 5 days now I've been working on a project called CryptoCat, which is what I'll be talking about today. And so this is a conference about the freedom to connect and digital liberties and things like that. And those things, I feel, in order for them to be encouraged or preserved, you need to make sure people can communicate with each other in a way that's private, safe. And this has been usually the prerogative of countries elsewhere, not in North America. With legislation that's being passed here and the legislative trend that North American states are adapting, it's becoming more of a worldwide problem that you need to have encrypted secure communications everywhere. So, and even if you travel to other countries and you teach journalists how to use encrypted instant messaging, and you spend days telling them how to use it, they'll still go and use Facebook chat or Google chat, even if their lives depend on it. Because encrypted instant messaging applications so far have been designed by academics, people from various militaries, and they're not made for journalists or human rights workers or students or hackers or developers, or, well, maybe hackers actually, and developers, but sorry, yeah. But what I'm working on is a way to make this sort of thing accessible, and that's what CryptoCat is. Slides. Okay. So what CryptoCat tries to achieve is that you have encrypted instant messaging between a group of people, not just two people. You can have up to 10 people chatting at the same time. You can share images, files, and you have basically privacy and encryption that is easy to use and ready to access. It works in your browser, in any operating system. Instant access, you can install it into Google Chrome as a Chrome app, into Firefox soon as a Firefox app, and we're also working on Android and iOS versions that are being deployed this summer. And so what we found out of this is that if you actually develop a instant messaging platform that's easy to access, where you can just send someone a link and then you're chatting with them securely, then people actually care. People will actually use it, and not just people who need to use it, but people who value privacy, which is a surprising bunch on the internet. And if you look at the user statistics, I mean, last month we had almost 28,000 people using. That's just like the demonstration CryptoCat installation. Since the code is open source, you can set up your own CryptoCat network, and people will be able to access it through any web browser or any mobile phone. And it's meant to be easily and instantly accessible. And what we're working on right now, the challenges that we're facing is that we need to make sure the code is delivered safely. Since it's, part of it, a large part of it is browser-based client-side encryption technology, we need to make sure the browsers get the code safely, which is why there's versions of CryptoCat that are local apps for Google Chrome and Firefox, because not developing the code safely to people in dangerous countries would be a catastrophe. Get it? Nerds are known for lame jokes. And we're also peer-reviewing our cryptography techniques so that we ensure people get their privacy. Okay. So these are the challenges we're working on right now. And if you're a developer, if you're someone who I've gotten a bunch of awesome people. By the way, I'm really impressed by how many people here know Arabic. And I got a bunch of people who work in that part of the world. And I really want CryptoCat one day to be secure enough with our crypto super peer reviewed. It's already peer reviewed, but we need more peer review. And we also need to have local apps for all sorts of phones and browsers and operating systems, and which is pretty much almost done too, so that we can deploy it anywhere, so that anyone can jump and use encrypted chatting with a group of people, so that you can send images and files to each other from your smartphone that are encrypted, as easy as it is to use Facebook chat, and not more difficult with sounds and desktop notifications and a cat and all those nice things that web applications tend to offer. And so the code is open source. It's all open source software. It's available right now on the Chrome App Store. We also have the Chrome Web Store. We also have project.crypto.cat, which is a website where you can actually watch a CryptoCat cartoon and download documentation and a whole bunch of stuff concerning the project. And I really suggest you check it out because it's really cool and it's what my entire life is about. I'm totally worthless without this thing. So I would really appreciate it, and I also want to extend my deepest thanks to have the opportunity to address such an exceptional crowd that represents a large part of the internet. It's really an honor to be able to do so, and I really hope you'll check out my project. Thank you very much.
Sorry, need a little bit of adjustment. Hi, I'm Josh King. I'm the technical lead at New America Foundation's Open Technology Institute, or OTI. And I'm here to talk to you today about the project that I spend most of my time working on, which is the Commotion Wireless project. The Commotion Wireless project really comes out of in its current form, its genesis is from the Arab Spring protests and when the internet was shut off in Egypt. And it kind of created this whole upswell amongst online activists and hackers and civil society people to try and come up with some technological solutions to try and help the people in Egypt when their internet was shut off be able to help those activists be able to communicate. And so that started a bunch of different projects brainstorming ideas. And we, at OTI, we have a background in, or many of us have a background in community wireless networks and open source wireless mesh networks, which means these are technologies that allow devices like smartphones, laptops, basically anything with a Wi-Fi card in it to be able to connect directly to each other and to be able to form either super local networks that allow people to talk to each other maybe with a few devices in a single room, all the way up to large metro scale wireless networks like exist in a few places in Europe that can have hundreds or thousands or even tens of thousands of nodes covering huge geographical regions using just open source technologies and Wi-Fi to provide both local services and to spread internet access amongst themselves. And so we started looking at how to adapt these kinds of technologies to the problem of Egypt. And they have a lot of potential for addressing exactly those kinds of problems. They can help with dealing with surveillance through both the fact that you're able to build your own network infrastructure that's separate from whatever existing infrastructure is around and is already set up to be surveilled, and can potentially be set up with the best available end-to-end encryption technology that you can have in a wireless network. They can also, through the same mechanisms, deal with censorship, where if your content is getting blocked on the regular telecommunications networks, the ability to generate your own network infrastructure can provide alternate channels for that content to be shared either locally or with the wider world through shared internet connections. And unlike a lot of other circumvention technologies, it can help deal with the problem of what happens when the network gets blacked out entirely. Technologies like VPNs and proxies and things are incredibly useful, but they do require access to a network in order to be able to operate. And so this is potentially a complementary technology to those sorts of existing circumvention tools that are already out there. And what we found when going to all of our friends in the community wireless networking and open source wireless mesh networking communities that are already building these networks, we found the things that needed to be addressed in order to make this technology suitable for use by activists overseas is that it needed encryption by default. None of these technologies were designed with security in mind because they were largely designed by hackers like in their own communities to be able to talk to each other and share internet access. And they weren't designed with this sort of built-in security, and so they would need strong security architecture to be added into the technology. Best effort on anonymity. Likewise, these technologies, many of them share a picture of the entire network with every single device in the network, and that isn't, without additional work, isn't suitable for providing the kind of anonymity that you would need in a circumvention network to prevent the communication from being tracked. And usability for non-geeks. Like I said, these things are designed by hackers, so lots of them have been around for years and work really well, but do not scale without network engineers to be able to deploy them. A lot of them don't have graphical user interfaces at all, and they certainly don't have documentation that allows users to be able to easily deploy them. So we founded the Commotion Wireless project to basically take all of these existing open source wireless mesh networking technologies and add in security and anonymity, and to improve their usability, create documentation and interfaces, and to be able to resource all of the cool projects that have been out there doing all of this good work for so long, and be able to create an integrated platform that allows activists to communicate using open source wireless mesh networking technologies. It's all open source and all available online at commotionwireless.net. We're still in a pretty early alpha stage, but there are router images and downloadable clients that are available for testing, and we welcome participation in the project. So my time is up. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to talk to you all about this project. And I hope you'll come talk to me about it and also check out our website. Yeah, thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Katrine Rucklas. I run an organization called Mobile Active and a project called Safer Mobile that works with activists and human rights defenders and journalists on more secure and safer mobile communications. We do have a workshop later on, so if you want to know more about that, come see us. Practical tips. Where's the clicker? There we go. The challenge. In our work with activists and human rights defenders worldwide, we found, or are finding, that mobile surveillance in particular is increasing. There are now 6 billion active mobile subscriptions used by many people all over the world. They're vital tools for organizing, for documenting, and for communicating news and information. At the same time, mass surveillance of mobile networks in particular has increased. However, we have very little data. we have lots of anecdotal data, but very little empirical data on what actually is the degree of mobile surveillance and mass monitoring, and to what extent is that surveillance used against activists and journalists in particular. So here's what we did. And I have to say, this is rather self-serving research, because we want to know what's the operational environment look like in a given country where we may be working or where there's activists. So we set out through a long time of desk research to collect lots and lots of data on the mobile market, regulations, and instances of abuse. We, for the first time ever, actually have a comprehensive database of SIM card registration requirements worldwide, and believe it or not, that didn't exist before. So here we are, a little tiny nonprofit that gathered the data. And some of the things that we found is, for instance, that in the most repressive regimes, as categorized by Freedom House, the least free countries, there's 100% SIM card registration requirements, meaning that in order to activate a SIM card, you have to provide PII, personally identifiable information, that is directly linking your mobile use to your identity. We also found that that percentage drops significantly if you go to the next category of countries, the partially free countries, and it drops even further as you go to the so-called free countries. The future. So while we did a lot of gathering of data all around the world, we need your help, because you know the laws and the regulations and the incidences of surveillance being used against activists much better than we possibly could ever find out through merely desk research. So, for instance, Sunil, where are you? I was looking at the India data, and it's pretty clear that there is much more fine-grained and detailed information that is needed that people like you and Anya could provide. For instance, Sri Lanka, where are you? You could provide the same. So we would love to talk to you to add additional data points. We're working with Privacy International, for instance, on adding data on the sale of surveillance equipment to telcos in particular as an additional data point to the existing data. And there may be others that we're overlooking at this point. So fine-tuning what we found, as well as systematically collecting additional data, is something that we're really looking to you all to. I want to thank a couple of people and organizations, Privacy International and Eric King in particular, who has done an enormous amount of work on surveillance equipment sales in particular, our developers at CityVox, and then Google, which supported this work. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Lukas Dixon. I'm an engineering lead for Google Ideas. So, I want us to think about the ways in which independent media and human rights organizations are attacked with technology. People mostly think of hacking, of blocking of websites, of surveillance of phones. Sometimes people forget the role of so-called distributed denial of service attacks. These attacks, called Ddos attacks for short, typically involve thousands of infected computers which are being controlled without the knowledge of the owners. During an attack, the malicious computer, illustrated here at the top, sends requests, commands to hundreds or thousands of computers in the middle, which are infected, to each send hundreds of requests to the victim's server. That's the computer at the bottom that's crying. So an amazing thing about denial of service attacks is how prevalent they are. According to recent estimate, a third of server downtime is caused by DDoS attacks, and 1 in 10 sites are attacked more than 6 times per year.
So a report by the Berkman Center highlights a chilling characteristic of these attacks. They're often around elections, and they often used to effectively censor the voice of opposition. They are, 1/3 of them are politically or ideologically motivated. You can also buy one online. You can buy some censorship online. So, let's get here. So the Berkman report also highlights how we can protect these sites. To protect them, they suggest that relatively small server, such as that typically used by a human rights organization, can be supported by moving it closer to the core of the internet. What that means is that the server, the crying box on the previous slide at the bottom, instead, which was previously connected directly to users and also attackers, now connects through a layer of bigger servers, which are themselves considered to be in the core of the internet. They have high bandwidth. So that's illustrated here. Our now happy little server box at the bottom is connecting through the big service provider. That's the 3 bigger boxes, which are then connected to the people. So these big service providers are organizations like Google and Yahoo. So an example of a service which connects to the core of the internet is Google's Pagespeed service. So it's still in testing, and it is not designed to provide DDoS protection. It does so by the architecture which it uses, which is common to other services as well. So it's essentially employing what's called a distributed cache of the site. That means that there's copies of the content of the site that are distributed in servers all around the world. When a customer or attacker visits the site, the content they're requesting is returned from the nearest available server. Services like this protect the site in 2 ways. For traffic from an attack that was previously going to the single server, it now gets distributed along lots of bigger servers. So now small attacks can sometimes just be ignored, and bigger attacks can now be protected and identified by software that's running on the bigger service provider. So DDoS protection is really actually not very easy. It's fundamentally really hard to tell the difference between legitimate traffic and traffic that has malicious intent. So this brings us to consider the future. So we've got an opportunity here as a community to work together to identify and map out the ecosystem of denial of service attacks. So if you want to read more, I totally recommend this excellent report by the Berkman Center. And if you want to talk more about it with me, I'd be delighted to speak to you, and I'll be in a stall later. Thank you for your time.
Hi, everyone. My name is Olivia Ma, and I'm the news manager at YouTube.
Hi, my name's Sam Gregory, and I'm the program director at Witness. Witness is a human rights organization that helps people use video for human rights. Founded 20 years ago after the Rodney King incident, when it was a question of giving people cameras. Now, of course, we're in a world with ever more cameras, and the question that faces us is how do we help people use their ability to create and share to create effective human rights change. And we're here today to announce a new project that we're working on also partnered with Storiful, the pioneering social news agency that works on discovery and verification.
So, from its inception 7 years ago, YouTube has been a platform for free expression. The founders of YouTube created the site because there was no easy way to share videos with your friends on the internet. But I'm not sure they realized when they started that they were essentially building the engine for a free and independent media ecosystem powered by individuals around the world. And that's what we see today, that's how many, many activists around the world are actually using YouTube today. With the rise of video-enabled cell phones and increased access and ubiquitous internet access, as well as the culture of sharing via social media, everyone today has the ability to bear witness to the news and events that are happening around the world. And nowhere is this more powerful than in documenting human rights, which is what we wanted to talk to you guys about today. Video is a medium that marries sight, sound, and motion, and it is a powerful tool for activists who want to share their cause with the world and get a global audience to pay attention to issues that might not otherwise be covered.
And our experience has been seeing in the last few years the incredible diversification and growth of the number of people creating human rights video online. And we put up this slide to indicate some of that range. It's everyone from the protesters in Occupy Wall Street in Syria and Iran, the accidental citizen witnesses. It's long-term social movements and NGOs who are turning to online video as a tool to uncover stories that have gone undiscussed or unresolved. And it's also people taking advantage of what happens when perpetrators put their footage online, like this footage from Egypt of police violence or Sri Lanka of army violence, how they turn that into political action. At the same time, we've seen a number of challenges that have emerged. There are huge amounts of content. An amazing statistic that there are now 72 hours of video uploaded to YouTube each minute. There are some places where there are thousands of hours of footage, some places where there's a single hour every month in terms of human rights footage. So challenges of information management and overload. There are challenges around authentication and verification. And there are challenges around how we help people do this as safely and effectively as possible so that people who put their lives at risk are able to secure change with that video. So it's in that light that we're launching a new human rights channel on YouTube that's designed to be a single destination for human rights video in that space, and we're delighted to share more about that. So there are three aspects to what we're working on YouTube, and this is the launch version of the site. We are curating and contextualizing with Storeful three sets of content. Breaking news, the kinds of day of pieces of citizen witnessing, citizen journalism that emerge from both places where we're expecting it to, sadly, like Syria, but also the unexpected places, East Timor, Honduras, where little bits of citizen witnessing are the only news source that is appearing. We're also making an effort to think, how do we surface some of those undercovered stories? So it's not just the stories that get thousands or millions of views, but the stories that might typically otherwise get 100 views on YouTube, or 50 or 10. And how do we bring those to the surface, give context around those? And then we're also looking at how do you provide the skills and the tools to citizen witnesses and human rights activists to know how to do this safely, effectively, ethically, and have access to them straight away as they upload. So those three trains of content on the site. And we're also looking at how we build community around that, particularly working at the moment with Google+. So what can you do? There are three things that we would encourage you to do and to join this initial experiment with us. One is, for those of you who are part of activist or creator communities, to film and share to the channel. By sending it directly, by flagging it up, we want to have the broadest range of content and are also open to partners who are thinking about how they build community around human rights footage.
We also, I think the reason we wanted to announce this channel today here with this group is that we want to enlist your help in helping us get the word out. We think this is a really exciting project, but it does need an audience, and we want to mobilize this group to help us spread the word through your various social channels.
And of course, the final stage for those of us coming from the human rights community is how do we translate this into action and change? We're looking at a number of options for how we do that on the site, but we'd like your feedback. Comments on the Google Plus page would help us, but also join us in turning this footage into action by sharing it. Again, the website, the link for it is youtube.com/humanrights. Thank you.
And we'll be out demoing it in the lobby afterwards. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Claudio Ruiz, and I come from Chile. I'm director of a local NGO called Derechos Digitales, like digital rights in English. And the project that I wanted to share it's about copyright. From our perspective, the copyright expansion is one of the most important challenges on fundamental rights on the internet. This is because the copyright regulation represents all kinds of problems from the freedom of expression point of view. The first one, for instance, is the lack of exceptions and limitations on intellectual property, focused especially on libraries, for instance, but especially on political discourses. I'm talking about especially on exceptions and limitations on political parody. And of course, on second place, the importance of exceptions like fair use. But the other kind of problems that we are facing in South America, I will say it's about the international agreements on copyright. I'm especially thinking about TPP, ACTA, and the USTR kind of declaration about our copyright scope, because these kind of international agreements are raising protection standards, but not raising access standards in third world countries, especially Latin America. So the challenges on copyright regulation in my country, and especially in the region, are about the normal state of the art. We have democracies. In my country, it's like 25 years old democracy after a dictatorship of Pinochet. But besides of that, we do have very important problems on freedom of expression in regular democracies in our third world countries. So, from the legal perspective, I will say we have very important problems in the way that the legal environment face the freedom of expression problems. And they're problematic because there's no obvious way to just face these freedom of expression problems. The problems are not obvious at all. So we have running a lot of research projects on this, obviously from the legal point of view, from the legal perspective. And I wanted to share just two special things. At last, from like 2 years from now, we have a very brand new copyright regime. We reformed our last copyright act. This is dated from 1970. We've reformed it like 2 years ago. And we have now a very, very good notice and takedown process on copyright content. But besides to have a very good copyright notice and takedown regime that is always in judicial, it's not administrative, neither private, we have a lot of problems with, I would say there's in two ways. The first one is we have private notices instead. There's at least two important cases that we are facing in Chile. The first one is about embedded YouTube content. Especially that content that is provided by copyright owners, but taken down by collecting society that representing kind of copyrights of these copyright owners. So they asking bloggers, for instance, to just take down YouTube videos that are provided by the own artists on a platform like YouTube or Vimeo, etc. And the second kind of problems that we're facing is about private orders provided by prosecutors or police. Of course, there's not valid by law, but bloggers and website administrators, of course, they're taking down that content and providing, of course, user information in special cases. So we think this is a very, very important case. And the second thing that I wanted to share with you is about the domain name system. There's a lot of cases that you're seeing on the slides right now. Oh, I'm running out of time. But there's a lot of domain names cases that we are facing in the last 5 years, I will say. That there is a kind of arbitrary private kind of domain system resolution. But these 4 cases are .cl, that the Chilean DNS system, about Piñera Miente, for instance. This was one side very politically critical about the new president. This is called Sebastián Piñera. And this is in Spanish is Piñera Lies. And that was taken down because of the own president of the Republic after it was elected. And actually the blogger that ran that project with very strongly political discourse was absolutely lost on the case. So there's a lot of cases that we have a station room and a station on the next room to just share very more details on it. But okay, I'm running out of time. What about the future? I would say the future is engagement civil rights on the general public. I'm thinking about especially related with copyright, privacy, and freedom of expression to help local development on civil society on my region that is very, very complicated, as I said. Promoting best practices, especially on librarians, for instance, on exceptions and limitations. I know, I'm just finishing. And the third one, and just monitoring those practices and build better legal environment and, of course, better tools to just improve freedom of expression on the internet. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Fabian. I co-lead the innovation unit at UNICEF. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about sort of some issues, cross-cutting issues that I think have been going around for the last day here and that our team looks at very closely, and particularly what is the future of real-time information? What's the future of real-time information when it's created by the next generation of producers and young people around the world? Briefly for background, UNICEF is the world's largest organization that advocates for and ensures the rights of children. And particularly, we focus on the most marginalized and most difficult to reach populations, which is kind of awesome. Our organization is in 135 countries, and we have about 15,000 staff on the ground. UNICEF is traditionally known for ensuring that commodities reach communities in need, for ensuring that technical knowledge reaches government, and that policy is passed from country to country in appropriate ways. UNICEF is the world's largest purchaser of vaccines. We buy about 60% of the world's vaccines, for example. And one of the things that's a luxury of having 135 country offices is that we're able to do all of this work with hyper-local sort of sensibilities and hyper-local focus, but with this global ability to scale. So while we deliver these vaccines to the most difficult operating environments in the world, places like Somalia or South Sudan, we're also able to work with global pharmaceutical companies at a level that can allow us to ask them to open up their prices, to create market transparencies. And so we live in this space between very, very local and very, very global problems, which is exactly where this information discussion lies. And the challenge that I want to pose in this few-minute talk is how can we, in addition to being a broker of commodities and policy and technology, or techniques for development, how can we be a broker in the coming years of real-time information and ensure that voices that come from and voices that are spoken for most vulnerable communities in the world actually get to government and get to places where those voices can make change? And the question is, how can UNICEF be part of that discussion and help be an authentic broker of those voices? I want to talk for a minute about a project that's happening in our office in Uganda. This is a project called U-Report. U-Report is sort of built on an open-source rapid SMS system that UNICEF has developed over the last few years. And U-Report lets around 120,000 young people give their views in response to poll questions. 120,000 people is tiny in comparison to the population of 23 million people under 25 in Uganda, so this is not an enormous segment of the population yet, but it's growing very fast. This project has been around for 6 months now and has put out about 50 poll questions to those young people. So you're able to respond through a text message, through a sort of free SMS gateway, which is okay. The cool thing is that when you do respond, you get a response back from UNICEF that kind of gives you some more information or addresses whatever it is that you've sent in. That's kind of cool. The really cool thing is that all of those responses, and out of 120,000 people, we get probably 20% response rate. All of those responses are aggregated, and they're presented in newspapers twice a month, and they're presented on TV in a special TV show twice a month. When that happens, government, parliamentarians, and others are engaged in the dialogue with young people around those issues. So recently, a question went out about a government fund to kind of produce innovation in Uganda, particularly in northern Uganda. And one of the sets of responses that kept coming back in aggregate was that the problem with the fund was that you needed to have a high school degree to even apply to get money from it. That response came up. It was shared on newspaper. It was shared on TV. Parliamentarians saw and heard that, and within a few weeks, I think within 3 weeks, had changed the requirements for the fund so that any young person in Uganda could apply for it. And that's a type of response loop and instant feedback loop that's very authentic and very gratifying. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the future of this type of engagement. As Sanaa said at dinner yesterday, I think very articulately, these types of projects can go to national scale, can go to global scale when they're built with humility, when they're built with the end user at the front of it, not when they're built from the top down. Anything we build from New York and try to push out fails. That's a lesson we've learned the hard way. And these types of projects can start to point us to a future where we can do development a little bit differently and we can engage young people differently. When we as UNICEF can know about what's happening in the most remote parts of Malawi, Zambia, northern Uganda, we can gear increasingly diminished development resources differently. Donors can have a type of transparency that they've never been able to have to projects and to people and to where their money's going. And most importantly, projects like YouReport and some of the other things that have been discussed today allow young people to really put a stake in, to put a claim to what is their future and ours in a way that would never have been possible before some of this work happened. Thank you very, very much for your time.
Hi, my name is Niklas Lumblad, and I head up a public policy research group at Google in Mountain View. And I would like to spend a few minutes just to present a project that we've just started and ask for your help to develop it further. What we are trying to do right now in this project is that we're trying to show governments that free expression, free flow of information is not something that you add on after you've had economic growth, not something you add on after you have innovation going in your country, but actually one of the prerequisites to get all of those things really functional and really developing. As some of you know who attended the economics workshop yesterday, there's a number of really good preliminary studies that show the relationship between the internet and economic growth, and we're trying to bring this now to the next level. And we're at the very early stage, which is why I wanted to present this here today and ask for your help too. What we have done is that we have looked at a number of different data sets to try to find correlations between freedom indices and other indices of innovation, of education, of cultural production, and this is just one of the examples. We have 5 or 6 slides like this that show how the different data sets correlate. So this is Freedom on the Net from the Freedom House together with the Global Innovation Index, and you can see that there's an interesting tendency here, but it's just that, and we need to get more data, and we need to get more data sets into the mix. We do believe that if we can do that, if we can move forward exploring these correlations and actually perhaps getting to a point where we can show causation, we can talk to governments in government's language and show them that before you adopt free flow policies, you're not going to get the innovation and economic growth that will bring prosperity to your people. So the next steps for us, the future, is that we are going to look at more measures. We're going to look at more data sets. We know there are lots of data sets being produced right now, and we think that measuring our freedom is one of the really important ways of making sure that we can manage and maintain it. So we want to hear from you if you know about projects where we can find good measures, if you know about data sets that we should include. And I'm hoping I'm going to be around all day. I'm hoping to get a couple of new ideas, and if you're willing to collaborate with us on this, that would be fantastic. Because as W.B. Yeats, the Irish poet, used to say, with measurement began our might. And if we don't measure our freedom, we're likely to lose it. Thank you.
So let's have a round of applause for all of those presenters. I think you can really see the range of research and the really incredible work that's going on in this field and how important it can be to all of us. And we just wanted to give everybody here a taste of what's out there. And I do encourage you to talk to these folks and to talk to the people who are sitting next to you, because God knows what they're developing back in their labs and their classrooms. Let me turn now to our last presenter before we're going to take a little break, and that is Zeynep Tufekci. How did I do? Where are you? Oh, there you are. How did I do? Okay. Okay, better than I got a better than most out of that. Zeynep is a leading authority on the convergence of technology with politics and culture. She has the title of assistant professor at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, currently a fellow at the Berkman Center, of which we heard something about just recently, for Internet and Society at Harvard. She's written extensively on surveillance, on privacy, on collective action. She's a contributing writer to The Atlantic, I believe, an awesome blogger, and tweets extensively. I don't know how she finds the time to do other things. We're very happy to have her here to talk to us about some of the larger trends that we see in the internet and political change. So I'll turn over the podium to Zeynep.
Thank you for that welcome. It was actually very good pronunciation of my relatively difficult name.
Hold on, I'm going to have to be double-fisted.
So thank you for that introduction and a very good pronunciation of my fairly difficult name. So I want to talk about a little bit of the broader conceptual trends that I think are becoming clearer as a result of the kind of wonderful research that we heard about. So the first thing I want to start with is that some of our terms are misleading and confusing and don't help us understand what's going on. And one of my favorite words not to like is the word virtual, because it keeps implying that there's a virtual world out there that is separate from this world, that is somehow the correct conceptual model is, Matrix versus the Zion, that there's a separate world, and people will talk, and everybody will do this. They'll say in real life versus virtual world, and the real activism versus as if there's an unreal world. That is not the correct way to look at it any more than, is the telephone unreal? Is the writing unreal? Or is this chair unreal? There are technologies that have different attributes, but they are not unreal. The internet is not virtual. It is as real as anything else. But online and offline are different. I am not arguing that they are the same thing. In fact, bits and atoms have different properties. And the way the internet is designed means that you can't control bits the way you control atoms. And a lot of businesses and a lot of governments were dependent on a particular way of controlling atoms, people, our bodies, and their business model and their governance model is being challenged exactly because bits and atoms are integrated. And this is a picture by Patrick Baz of Agence France Presse of protesters in Tahrir, as you can see, hacking into the international flow of information to get the word out. And faster may be different, but people are people. Another thing that I occasionally hear is that we have this generation that is uniquely this or uniquely that, or people are different. That is actually we have a lot of research. People are not very different than they were maybe 100 years ago or maybe 1,000 years ago, to the degree we can tell, or more. There's a great research by a group of people that just got published in PNAS about social networks of hunter-gatherer groups, the last few surviving ones, and they look a lot like our social networks. It's really fascinating. What is different is that the environment in which people live through these very basic human things that we want to do is different. So this is a photograph I took in the highlands of Chiapas in Mexico when I went there, and this is late 90s, early 2000s. I went there a couple of times to look into the claim the Zapatistas were using the internet very effectively. That's not what I'm going to talk about. The short answer is no, they didn't even have electricity. What happened when I went there was that I found a place they didn't have electricity. And this is a photograph that I was asked to take by their mother. And very often in Chiapas, they don't want you to take photographs. It's complicated, so I'm used to not whipping my camera out. But she said, please take a photograph of my kids. By she said, I mean she said it in a Mayan language that an 8-year-old translated into Spanish, that my broken Spanish translated into Turkish in my head. And I said, why do you want this? And she said, I never have a photo of my children. They are growing up before my eyes, and I have no record of it. So this was just barely 10, 15 years ago, well, 10 years ago, a little less, that we had parts of the world where there were no cameras ever. And this isn't, this is Mexico. Now we're at a world where we were just looking at these amazing numbers from the the Witness and YouTube presentation, basically it's almost saturated. Almost everyone in most parts of the world who's an adult has a cell phone, and almost all of them have a camera capacity. This is a very different world. But there is no new media versus old media. It's an ecology. People keep talking new versus old. It's already one ecology. This is a photograph I took in Tahrir during a protest. And on the left, you have the traditional, the activist. He's even wearing a Facebook Revolution t-shirt in case you missed the message. See, I'm being very subtle here. Taking a photograph. But what most people don't notice is what's on the 8th floor, right above where I took this photograph. That's the Al Jazeera camera, kind of protectively hovering over Tahrir. And that's one ecology. And one of the presentations talked about, I think Jeffrey's, it's just one. Al Jazeera takes this content, rebroadcasts it, and it goes on. And public, because it's a meta concept, is, I think, transformed irrevocably. This is a screenshot of people watching themselves in Syria during a protest. Al Jazeera is showing their protest live, and they're looking at Al Jazeera and seeing themselves reflected live as they're protesting. And it's just a cycle of they're encouraged by the fact that the world knows that they're there. By what I mean by public as a meta concept is, it's not about what you think. It's not even about what you think your neighbor thinks. It's about you knowing and being able to see what your neighbor thinks, and your neighbor knowing what you think, and on and on. And that is a public sphere that in the Arab uprisings we saw was very important, because all of a sudden people knew that Mubarak was unpopular. But what they didn't know was how many of their countrymen and women would say they're going to Tahrir on January 25th. And you had a Facebook page that had a couple 100,000 likes, people saying, yes, I will be on Tahrir on January 25th. Hundreds of thousands of people saying that. And that makes a big difference, because public is a meta concept. So pluralistic ignorance, the notion that you can rule by making people think they're a minority, that is probably not going to work anymore. And the concept of slacktivism, I'm really conflicted. I understand, effective activism versus non-effective activism, but I want slacktivism. I wish people would just never use that term, because I think a lot of it is a disdain for people stepping into the public sphere to take some form of symbolic display of what they think. And the disdain, I think, is in the term, because it's like as if they're activists, they're slacking in their activist duties, when it is actually people saying, this is what I think. They're not activists slacking. They're people taking symbolic action. Whether or not it's effective really depends on context and a lot of things. But humans are symbolic, and humans really, all social change is accompanied by people displaying, often symbolically, what they think. So to sort of look down on that is not, I think it's just gatekeeper disdain. And this is a photo from the Kony video, and I understand all the problems with that video. And it simplified a lot of things, but that was the wonderful thing about the internet, is nothing ever stays simple. You throw something to the internet and you simplify, because stories and fables are often simplified, but it comes back really complicated. This is a screenshot of Rosebel Kagumar, who's a Ugandan blogger. She did not like the content of the Kony 2012 video. So she turned on her web camera on her laptop. You can see it's really just, she sat down. There's zero production value here, because there's nobody even thinking, how do I light this scene? She just turned it on. She started talking. She started explaining what she thought was wrong with this, and she had millions of views just on that. And I think that is just an amazing world, because my mind goes back to the era of television, where things like We Are the World, I don't know if anybody remembers those campaigns from the 80s, where we had simplification of the worst kind with the public, the supposed victims that were never able to turn on their webcams and say, wait a minute, this is what I think about how you're representing me. So that, I think, is wonderful. So we are in an era of a lot more participation. But I do want to warn people that participation is not some unalloyed good that always leads to positive things. If you think that, you probably have never studied human history, because participation has not always led to things that we value, things that we think of as good. And this is a photograph from right after the Rwandan genocide. This is a pile of machetes that the genocidaires, the people who committed the genocide, are leaving behind in the Rwanda-Zaire border. And that genocide was partially enabled because machetes became really cheap with the introduction of Chinese manufacturing. You could buy them 10, 20 cents a piece all of a sudden. And the year before the genocide, about 750,000 were imported into Rwanda, probably explicitly for the purpose of preparing for the genocide. And because that genocide was interrupted relatively abruptly, we have numbers on how people were killed. And basically, 60 to 70% of the people were killed either by machete or close, knives, hacking. So this was a very participatory genocide that was partly facilitated by a kind of small media, Rwanda radio. So this is my warning to people. This is a recent enough example that if participation can be a machete and not always a positive thing. And this is another example I have. I talked about it a little bit in the workshop. This is a screenshot from a YouTube video. It's another awful story of a young woman named Dua Halil, who was from a Yazidi village in northern Iraq. And Yazidis are a fairly secretive community, complicated reasons. They practice endogamy, which means they don't marry outside their community. And she ran away with the wrong boy. She tried to get married to the wrong person. And she was caught and brought back and stoned to death. This is an awful, awful story. What is, to me, incredibly striking and scary and striking, again, is that people whipped out their mobile phones and recorded this. I watched the video. There were 4 separate mobile phones recording stoning to death, and it was uploaded to YouTube. It's just crazy world. And it was followed shortly thereafter by a series of car bombings which killed about 1,000 people, which is the second largest act of non-state terrorism since 9/11. And people don't even sort of remember this one because I guess people are trying not to think about Iraq anymore. But this was in the context of a certain kind of surveillance that I think we're going to see more of. Not everything that's documented leads to a human right abuse being corrected or opposed. So, but the affordances are real. This is about Tahrir Supplies, a Twitter feed that I watched during the clashes in Egypt in November of 2011, where these are major clashes. Again, I'm not really explaining a long story. About 33 people died and thousands got injured. And if you know the geography of Tahrir, it's a fairly large square, but there are lots of key streets going into it. And there are 10 field hospitals that are scattered around the region. I watched 3 young adults, 22, 23, 25, basically. 3 of them, one in Dubai, one in Cairo, one in London, sort of sleep alternating around the clock, also with calling the doctors and everything, coordinate the supply of drugs, coordinate, who needs betadine, who needs surgical supplies, coordinate the flow of injuries, what's needed where, all the doctors. Just 3 kids. And they just decided they would do it, totally of their own initiative. And 10 field hospitals in clashes where 33 people died and thousands of people got injured. This is not a minor thing. And this is why I say Moscow, I say Privyet instead of speaking French or German, because this is what Napoleon did not manage, logistics. This is what Hitler did not, this got him down, logistics. And I watched 3 kids manage this with just Twitter and a Google spreadsheet on a website. So this is an amazing world. And information walls are coming down. They're definitely coming down. This is a picture of Zainab Al-Khawaja, who's a Bahraini activist. And this is a striking picture. To me, this is like the Tiananmen picture. She's standing in front of a row of riot cops. She's stopping them. They're on their way to a protest in Bahrain. And in this particular case, they couldn't even arrest her immediately because they didn't have female police, and this is Bahrain. But this photograph got out immediately, right? This photograph got out. And before, I watched this live, I mean, in real time. Before they could even get the female police, Nicholas Kristof was tweeting about it. Bahrain's media attaché, I guess, in D.C. was responding to us, and the police went to her, and then somebody said, let her go, let her go. And this has happened again and again. This is a kind of information flow that would not have happened. So social media does create this issue for repressive regimes. But it's an open world. It's not a flat world. For every Zainab al-Khawaja, almost by definition, there are many people that you've never heard about. And in fact, in Egypt, I'm watching with real worry that the government has figured this out. And I'm seeing a lot of scary stories of stuff happening to activists who are not as well known. They have realized that the well-known activists are hard to touch because of this. So everyone is learning. And I don't think anybody will be Mubarak anymore. This is a photograph of February 3rd, I believe, during the Tahrir protests, when Mubarak, in response to this amazing, creative, networked activist, what did he do? He sent camels and thugs on camels to try to beat them with sticks. One activist I interviewed said to me, I started laughing when I saw the camels charging on us. And I said, why'd you start laughing? I mean, lack of sleep? You went crazy? He said, no, we had just managed to smuggle satellite phones, and we had been giving live interviews to BBC, and we had got back on the internet. And this dude is sending us camels? You know, 17th century meet the 21st century. It was clear not going to work. But everyone is learning. You can see that we were seeing this total sort of assault. If there was a government sleeping about the potential of the internet, they are awake now. And this is a little photograph of a radio. That's a transmitter and a receiver. And that's what a radio was in the beginning. And the pushback made the radio into a receiving device only. So guys talk about, you know, just Facebook being your mobile phone and that's all you do on the internet. These things still have their potential, but that kind of pushback of the internet into various corners can happen and have real consequences. And so I'm going to conclude by saying that we're still discussing, this is a Book of Kells, which is a handwritten manuscript, and this is the Gutenberg Bible, which is printed. But you still see that they have these embellishments, because at first people didn't realize printing press in its native form, and they would spend days and weeks, hand painting pictures right next to it. That's what we're doing in the era of, I think, internet. It's so new that we're still thinking, how do we hand paint the side of books rather than understanding its native power? So this is history happening, and they're not going back. These are two young women I took photos in Tahrir during a protest. They have their cell phone. They're there. So history is moving ahead. It's a fascinating time, but it's a very complex time. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Rather than do questions up here, I'm going to ask people to corner Zeynep during the break, which we're going to take now. We're running behind, and I apologize for that. I started us late. We will move to the break area, and then at 11:15 we will start the workshops. The workshop lineup is the same as yesterday. I encourage you, obviously, to go to a different workshop that you went to yesterday. Thanks for being here again. Please.